There is a unique kind of pain that no one prepares you for. It is not the pain of being hated by your enemies. That is expected. You know where your enemies stand. Their opposition is visible. Their intentions are clear. The deeper wound comes from discovering that someone who stood beside you secretly struggled to watch you rise. They smiled when you succeeded. They congratulate you on your achievements. They told you they were proud of you. But something felt different, something you could not explain. The smile reached their lips, but never reached their eyes. And that is the unsettling nature of silent jealousy. It does not always arrive with criticism, arguments, or open competition. Sometimes it sits at your table. It listens to your dreams. It asks about your plans. It celebrates your victories publicly, and privately, it hopes your next step is a failure. You expect enemies to hate your growth. You rarely expect discomfort from the people who claim to love you. That is what makes hidden jealousy so difficult to recognize. Open hatred is simple. You can defend yourself against someone who openly wants to defeat you. But a person who supports you with their words, while resenting you in their heart, creates a confusion that is much harder to understand. Because human beings are not only emotional creatures, they are status-conscious creatures. The success of someone close to us can become an uncomfortable mirror. It can force people to question their own choices, their own progress, and the dreams they abandoned. Sometimes your growth does not offend people because you have harmed them. Sometimes it hurts them because it reminds them of what they have not done. Not everyone who walks beside you wants to see you reach the destination. Some people celebrate your journey only as long as you remain behind them. And the deepest wounds often come from hands that once applauded you. Think about the moments when your success made someone strangely distant instead of happy. The friend who became colder after your achievement. The colleague who suddenly stopped supporting your ideas. The person who once encouraged your dreams but became uncomfortable when those dreams started becoming reality. These moments reveal one of the most uncomfortable truths about human relationships. Not everyone who claps for your success is celebrating it. Some are simply watching, waiting, measuring, comparing. Because the most dangerous jealousy is not the kind that attacks your life. It is the kind that quietly waits for your failure. Jealousy rarely begins as hatred. More often, it begins as comparison. And comparison is one of the oldest psychological instincts in human behavior. Long before modern society existed, human survival depended on social hierarchies. People lived in groups where status determined access to resources, protection, and opportunity. Being lower in the hierarchy did not just mean feeling inferior, it could mean being left behind entirely. So the human brain evolved a constant internal monitoring system. Who is ahead of me? Who is stronger? Who is more respected? Who is moving faster? Even in a world that no longer depends on survival in the same way, the mind still carries these ancient patterns. Modern life has only changed the stage, not the psychology. Today, people compare themselves across almost every dimension of existence. Intelligence, wealth, appearance, relationships, career progress, social attention. And because these comparisons are constant, emotional reactions become unavoidable. The uncomfortable truth is that success is not experienced equally by everyone who witnesses it. A stranger's success often feels distant. It can even feel inspiring because there is no emotional attachment or shared history. But a friend's success hits differently. A sibling's success feels heavier. A colleague's achievement feels personal because people closest to us become reference points for our own identity. This is where social comparison theory becomes painfully relevant. Humans do not evaluate themselves in isolation. They evaluate themselves in relation to others, especially those they consider similar or close. So when someone near us improves, it does not just register as their success. It becomes a reflection of our position, and that reflection can expose uncomfortable truths we normally avoid. Missed opportunities, delayed decisions, unfinished ambitions, excuses that once felt reasonable but now feel fragile. This is why jealousy often appears not among strangers, but among friends, siblings, classmates, and colleagues, because closeness creates comparison, and comparison creates emotional tension. The tragedy is that jealousy is rarely understood in its full emotional depth. It is not always hatred. In many cases, it is pain disguised as judgment. Pain of realizing someone else is moving forward while you are standing still. Pain of confronting the version of yourself you plan to become but have not yet reached. Pain of seeing your own potential reflected in someone else's results. The people who know your past sometimes struggle to accept your future because your growth does not only change your life, it changes the internal story they built about you. And sometimes it forces them to question their own. Your growth can become a reminder of someone else's excuses, not because you intend it to be, but because human psychology naturally compares timelines, effort, and outcomes. And once comparison begins to replace gratitude, emotional imbalance follows. Jealousy begins where comparison replaces gratitude. This is why success can quietly alter relationships without any obvious conflict. Nothing needs to be said. Nothing needs to be done. The change happens internally first. A shift in tone, a subtle distance, a quieter response to your achievements, a stronger reaction to your setbacks. And most people never recognize the pattern for what it is, because admitting jealousy is difficult. It forces a person to confront feelings they would rather rationalize than understand. So instead of saying, "I feel left behind," the mind says, "They changed." Instead of saying, "I feel inadequate," it says, "They got lucky." Instead of saying, "I feel uncomfortable with my progress," it says, "It's not that impressive anyway." And this is where jealousy becomes most dangerous, not when it is felt, but when it is denied. The most dangerous emotions are rarely the ones people admit to having. Very few people wake up in the morning and honestly say to themselves, "I am jealous of someone I care about," because jealousy threatens the image most people have of themselves. They want to believe they are supportive, kind, loyal, happy for the people they love. So when another person's success creates discomfort inside them, the mind often does not accept the feeling directly. It protects the ego, and that is where jealousy begins to wear a mask. Instead of admitting their success makes me question my own life, the mind creates a more comfortable story. They got lucky. They changed. They don't deserve all of this. I could have done the same thing if I had their opportunities. The human mind is incredibly skilled at protecting itself from painful truths. In psychology, this happens through mechanisms like rationalization, denial, and projection. People create explanations that preserve their self-worth, deny emotions they do not want to confront, or place their own uncomfortable feelings onto someone else. The tragedy is that many people are not even aware they are doing it. They genuinely believe their resentment is honesty. Their bitterness is wisdom. Their discomfort is concern, and this is why silent jealousy is so difficult to recognize. Because it rarely looks like hatred. it looks like support with a shadow behind it. A compliment that somehow leaves you feeling smaller. I mean, I guess you did well, but anyone could have done it with those connections. A joke that targets your achievements. A piece of advice that always encourages you to lower your ambition. A person who disappears when you win, but suddenly becomes available when you fail. Pay attention to who celebrates your victories with the same energy they comfort your losses. That difference reveals more than words ever will. Jealousy hides behind smiles because hatred is too easy to recognize. Sometimes the person who struggles with your success still loves you. That is what makes this reality so painful. A friend may genuinely care about you, but secretly compare their life to yours. A family member may want the best for you, but feel threatened when your progress exposes their own regrets. A colleague may respect your talent, but quietly wish they were the one receiving recognition. Human emotions are complicated. Love and envy can exist in the same heart. Affection and insecurity can live side by side. The person who cannot celebrate your success is often fighting a battle they refuse to admit. Not every criticism is concern. Sometimes it is wounded pride wearing wisdom. But understanding this does not mean you must become paranoid or see enemies everywhere. It means you learn to observe patterns instead of blindly trusting appearances. Notice who supports your growth. Notice who becomes uncomfortable when you no longer fit the version of you they were used to. Notice who celebrates your transformation, without secretly mourning the old version of you that made them feel superior. Because silent jealousy is rarely a sudden betrayal. It does not usually arrive as one dramatic moment that destroys a relationship overnight. It works quietly. A small comment here, a little distance there. Less excitement for your victories, more interest in your mistakes. Until one day you realize the person standing beside you was never truly walking with you. They were only comfortable with the version of you that never walked too far ahead. One of the most painful truths about human relationships is that love does not always exist without comparison. Sometimes the people who support you the most are also the people who are most comfortable with the version of you that does not threaten them, the version of you that struggles, the version of you that asks for advice, the version of you that remains below them in the invisible hierarchy they created in their minds. Because every relationship contains unspoken roles, the intelligent one, the successful one, the attractive one, the confident one, the person everyone admires. Most of the time, these roles are never discussed, but they quietly influence how people see themselves and others. And the moment those roles begin to change, something uncomfortable happens. Your growth forces people to question the identity they built around being above you. The friend who was always considered the successful one suddenly watches your career rise. The sibling who was praised for being the talented one sees your abilities being recognized. The person who once gave you advice now realizes they have something to learn from you. For a secure person, this transformation becomes a reason to celebrate. For an insecure person, it becomes a threat, because the ego has one primary mission: to protect the image a person has of themselves. And sometimes the ego would rather rewrite reality than accept that someone else has grown beyond the place where it left them. This is where silent jealousy becomes darker. It is no longer simply about wanting what you have. It is about needing you to remain where you were. Some people miss the old you because the old you made them feel superior. That sentence is difficult to accept because we naturally believe that the people closest to us will always be happy when we improve. But human emotions are complicated. A person can love your personality and still struggle with your transformation. They can care about your happiness and still feel uncomfortable when your progress exposes their own lack of effort. Your improvement exposes what others avoid improving. And that is why growth changes relationships, not because success automatically makes people jealous, but because success changes the balance that many relationships were unconsciously built upon. The person who once felt needed may now feel irrelevant. The person who once felt ahead may now feel threatened. The person who once enjoyed comparing themselves to you may no longer feel comfortable making that comparison. This does not mean you should hate them. Every human being experiences insecurity at some point. The real difference is what people choose to do with that insecurity. Healthy people allow your growth to inspire them. Unhealthy people secretly hope your growth stops. They may never admit it. They may continue smiling. They may continue speaking kindly. But their actions begin to reveal what their words hide. Less excitement when you succeed. More criticism when you improve. More attention when you fail. Less support when you no longer need them. Because jealousy rarely announces itself with honesty. It appears through small changes in behavior, small moments of discomfort, small attempts to pull you back toward the person you used to be. The most dangerous people are not always those who openly hate your success. Sometimes they are the ones who quietly hope it disappears. Jealousy becomes truly dangerous when it stops being a feeling and starts becoming a behavior. Most people imagine sabotage as something obvious, a betrayal, a public insult, a person openly trying to destroy your reputation. But the most effective forms of sabotage are rarely dramatic. They happen quietly, patiently, almost invisibly. A small comment that makes you question yourself, a joke that targets your biggest dream, advice that always seems to guide you towards safety instead of growth. The person doing it may never say, "I want you to fail." In many cases, they may not even consciously understand their own motivation. But human beings have a powerful tendency to protect their self-esteem. And when another person's success makes someone feel inadequate, they may attempt to restore emotional balance by reducing the person who creates that discomfort. Some people cannot rise with you, so they quietly attempt to pull you back. This is why silent sabotage often appears disguised as concern. Are you sure you're ready for that? I'm just trying to protect you from disappointment. Maybe you should lower your expectations. Sometimes those words come from genuine care, but repeated over time, with no encouragement, no belief, and no desire to see you evolve, they can become a prison built from doubt. The most effective attacks are often disguised as concern. Another form of hidden sabotage is the withholding of support. The person who had time for you when you were struggling suddenly becomes unavailable when opportunities appear. The person who knew valuable information chooses not to share it. The person who could celebrate your achievements responds with silence or indifference. Because your success creates a reality they do not want to face. Then there are the small narratives, the comments whispered in conversations, the subtle attempts to reduce your accomplishments. They were lucky. They had help. It's not that impressive. These statements are not always about destroying your reputation. Sometimes they are about protecting someone else's ego. If they can make your achievement appear smaller, they do not have to confront why they feel small in comparison. Not everyone blocking your path stands in front of you. Some stand beside you, smiling, listening, waiting for the moment your confidence begins to weaken. And this is why awareness matters. Not because you should become suspicious of every person around you. Not because every criticism is jealousy. Sometimes criticism is necessary. Sometimes difficult advice is an expression of love. The difference is in the pattern. Healthy people challenge you while still wanting to see you succeed. Jealous people discourage you because your success threatens the story they tell themselves. So ask yourself a difficult question. Who only gives you advice that keeps you exactly where you are? Who becomes comfortable only when you remain the person they have always known? Because the people who truly care about your growth may question your decisions, but they do not fear your transformation. They do not celebrate your limitations. They help you become more. And once you learn to recognize the difference between guidance and control, between concern and insecurity, another question appears, a question far more difficult than recognizing jealousy itself. How do you protect yourself from hidden negativity without becoming a person who sees enemies everywhere? The greatest mistake you can make after understanding jealousy is becoming afraid of everyone. Awareness without wisdom becomes paranoia. And the purpose of seeing human nature clearly is not to lose trust in every person you meet. It is to develop the ability to recognize patterns without allowing those patterns to poison your heart. The uncomfortable truth is that jealousy is not an emotion experienced only by bad people. It is a deeply human emotion. Almost everyone has looked at another person's success and felt a moment of comparison. A friend achieves something you wanted. A colleague receives recognition you hoped for. Someone younger reaches a place you thought you would reach first. For a brief moment, the human ego whispers a dangerous question. Why them and not me? The question itself is not what defines a person. What happens after that question is what reveals their character. A mature person turns comparison into curiosity. They ask, what can I learn from this? What habits, decisions, or sacrifices help them reach this point? Their envy becomes motivation. Their discomfort becomes self-reflection. But an immature mind takes the opposite path. It turns admiration into resentment. It searches for reasons to diminish another person because lowering someone else feels easier than raising itself. That is where jealousy transforms from a private struggle into a destructive force. The strongest people are not those who never experience jealousy. They are those who can look at another person's success without allowing their own insecurities to control their actions. And this realization changes the way you respond to jealousy in others. You do not need to fight every silent competitor. You do not need to explain your ambitions to everyone who questions them. You do not need to convince someone to be happy for your growth. Some battles are won by refusing to participate. Sometimes the greatest response is distance, silence, and continued progress. Awareness protects you. Bitterness destroys you. Because the moment you become obsessed with proving people wrong, you quietly hand them control over your decisions. Your life becomes a reaction to their doubts instead of an expression of your own purpose. Real emotional intelligence is knowing who deserves access to your struggles, your ideas, and your dreams. Not everyone deserves access to your dreams. Some people will support the seed, but fear the tree. They will encourage your potential, but become uncomfortable when that potential becomes reality. This does not mean you must hate them. It means you must understand them, observe their actions, respect your boundaries, protect your peace, and continue growing. Your success does not need to be explained to those uncomfortable with it. The people who truly care about you will not require you to become smaller so they can feel bigger. They will not ask you to hide your achievements to protect their insecurities. They will celebrate your evolution because your growth does not threaten their identity, and perhaps that is the highest form of maturity. To see the darkness in human nature without becoming consumed by it. To recognize jealousy without becoming jealous of the jealous. To understand insecurity without allowing it to dictate your path. Because the greatest power is not forcing people to understand your growth. It is reaching a point where you no longer need their permission to grow. There is a loneliness that does not come from being alone. It comes from becoming someone different than the version people were used to. Growth does not only change your life, it changes your relationships. Because not everyone who starts the journey with you is prepared to continue walking beside the person you become. Some people will celebrate your evolution. They will be inspired by it. They will adjust, adapt, and grow with you. But others will feel something quieter, something harder to admit. Discomfort. Because your growth forces them to confront a version of you they no longer understand. Or worse, a version of themselves they have not become. And so silently, without words, something begins to shift. Distance appears where closeness used to exist. Silence replaces excitement. Support becomes neutral observation. Not always out of hatred, but sometimes out of emotional confusion, because some people do not know how to love you in a version of yourself that no longer fits their expectations. They do not always leave. They do not always confront you. They simply adjust their emotional distance until the relationship becomes something smaller than it once was. And this is where the truth becomes difficult. Not everyone who struggles with your growth is your enemy, but not everyone who struggles with your growth is meant to stay close either. The deeper lesson is not to hate those who feel left behind. It is to understand the human emotions beneath their reactions and still continue forward without shrinking yourself to make others comfortable. Because the moment you begin reducing your light so others do not feel its intensity, you begin betraying your own evolution. The people who truly love you do not fear your growth. They grow with you. They do not require you to remain small for the relationship to feel safe. They do not need you to stay predictable for connection to exist. They adapt to who you are becoming instead of holding you hostage to who you were. Your light does not create darkness in others. It reveals what was already there. Insecurity, comparison, unresolved emotions, or simply the quiet realization that change is inevitable and not everyone is ready for it. Some relationships end not because you changed, but because you finally became yourself. And perhaps the most painful truth about silent jealousy is this: it rarely comes from strangers. It often comes from the people who once had the closest seat to your transformation. So you keep moving forward, not to prove anything, not to win anything, but because becoming who you are is never meant to require permission.